Did you hear that?
I did.
So, yeah, I'll be, like I said, I'll be taking notes, but I'll be listening and you can take off, you can identify. However, the floor is yours.
Okay. Right on. Thanks for having me, brother. I really appreciate being here and the good thing you're doing. The more we can get the message out there and try to help people in all walks of recovery, maybe even snag the ones that aren't even in recovery yet. Kudos to you for doing what you're doing, my brother.
Thanks.
Um, so yeah, I don't know where I'll start. I guess I'll start at the beginning. You can kind of see I'm brown. I'm 50% indigenous. Up here in Canada, we call it Cree. So I'm half Cree and half white. My dad's full blood Cree and my mom was full white. They met in a city called Calgary. I like to call Calgary the recovery capital of Canada. Recovery just kicks ass up here. And they got together when my mom was pretty young. My dad was a little bit older. They had me and my brother, and they moved out to BC, British Columbia. And things didn't go very well for their marriage, and they ended up splitting up. And my mom went somewhere, and my dad got custody of me and my brother. But the problem with my dad getting custody is an alcoholic, which is probably a big reason why my mom left him. Um, and my mom had her own mental health issues, and from what I found out later, she needed to go get well, right? So my dad took custody of us, and my very first like real good memory of being a child was being with my dad, living in this apartment with him and my brother, and just remember my dad always smashing shit, smashing furniture, smashing his stereo, his speakers, and he was a pretty angry guy. And me as a little kid, probably about kindergarten, it was pretty scary, eh? And that's the kind of environment that me and my brother saw. Although my dad wasn't like violent to me or my brother, verbally or physically, we were just in that environment. And, I think my dad carried a lot of guilt for what he couldn't control in his own addiction. And so he called up my grandmother on my mom's side and asked my grandmother if she would take me and my brother. So he shipped us off to my grandmother on my mom's side, and my brother Dan and I ended up living with her for the next couple years, which when I look back today, it was a blessing because my grandmother later in my recovery ended up becoming like the mustard seed of a higher power of which I could pray to because she had passed away, and she was such a beautiful soul. So the years that me and my brother lived with her, she was like, she just treated us like gold and she taught us the lessons. And it wasn't like she was a doormat. Like she would scold us and give us shit when we needed it because we were a couple, little kids that really pushed the limits. But she was just a beautiful soul. And so she gave us a lot of unconditional love, and she was always there. She always listened, and she was just like that one person in your life that you could always kind of count on. That was my grandma. And during the time me and my brother were living with my grandma, my mom was trying to get her shit together in Calgary, which is a fairly big city up here. And she would come out always bearing gifts, wanting to give her sons presents because she probably felt guilty for giving us up and not being around and blah, blah, blah. But every time my mom would come around with gifts, it was almost like I didn't want to see her. I was very mad and angry at my mom from a very young age. I would maybe say I even hated her, but that might be a little bit of a strong word. But, you know, I wasn't a real fan of my mom, man. And every time she'd come around, I'd make her cry and I'd say things that weren't nice. But when I look back, because I really believe that the spiritual malady is at the root of all addictions. And my spiritual malady was being born back then when I was living with my dad, seeing him being angry. My mom's not around. My dad's not really present. So a kid, me and my brother, we didn't get some of the things that we needed as very young children. And we started getting some of that with my grandmother. But I had like resentments against my mom, so that's why I treated her like that. And I was very angry. Eventually, my mom figured out her shit and she got us back, moved into Calgary. We bounced around to a couple different houses where her boyfriends were alcoholics. And finally, we landed in a community here called Ogden. And the boyfriend that she met when we were in Ogden, who did not live with us, but he was a raging alcoholic. He was a fucking asshole. And he would beat my mom, and my brother and I would, see the remnants of it. We never saw it happen like in person, but we saw the remnants. We'd hear the yelling, and me and my brother hated this guy too. But my mom really loved this guy. His name was Ken. And he would always come around and he was drunk and, trying to be real sweet to me and my brother, acting like a father figure. And I wanted nothing to do with this guy, right? And me and my mom would have fights often in the evening where I'd be yelling and screaming at her, like, leave this guy. He's no good for you. He's no good for us. Like, well, I want to protect my mom and my brother, but I have no power. I'm just a little kid, and my mom just does what she wants. And I remember this one time he was like trying to hug me and like get close as a father normally would. And, I could feel his rough whiskers on my face and I could smell the stench of whiskey. And I can like almost taste that and smell it right now, eh? And oh, it just makes me sick. One day, me and my brother came home from school. We used to walk home from school, pretty far walk back in those days. Those were the days where you could get away with that kind of thing, right? And we walked home from school and there was all my aunties and my grandmother's car were out front, and me and my brother were kind of looking at each other like, what's going on at our house? So we walk in the house, and there's my mom laying on the floor, and she's just a mud puddle of sorrow. She's sobbing and crying and kind of losing her mind. And, people are hovering over her. And then my auntie and my grandma see me and my brother walk in, and they kind of whisked us over to the kitchen so we didn't really see what was happening. And they told us in not these terms, but they had basically said Ken, my mom's boyfriend, had hung himself. And we were kind of shocked. And to be honest with you, I was kind of happy too, because I knew he wouldn't come around anymore. I knew he wouldn't beat up my mom anymore. And but I was really so sad because my mom was so distraught. So anyway, kind of get through that period of our lives, and my mom struggled with that for quite some time, and we ended up moving again. And but things are kind of getting to normal. I've been in school, same school for a few years. My brother, same thing, and we're both doing pretty good, playing hockey, doing the things that young kids do, playing on little sports teams and soccer and things like that. And I started hitting about 15, 16 years old, about 15. I hadn't been laid yet, and hadn't smoked dope yet, and I drank in once or twice, and I remember the feeling I had when I got drunk, and I didn't mind it at all. I think I tried it once at one of my uncle's weddings and got a little tipsy, and I really enjoyed that. But by the time I was 15, I started dabbling more and more into the marijuana and to the drinking, and I found that I really liked it. And right around that same time, it's kind of puberty too. I just didn't feel like fully connected. Maybe it was partly puberty, probably partly that spiritual malady that I had. And I just felt like separate a little bit from like people. Me and my mom were not getting along. We never got along. But the alcohol and the drugs allowed me to kind of have community and allowed me to feel that sense of belonging. And it was a good thing. And I got out of control on it fairly quickly. Over the next few years, I was in and out of juvenile jails. By the time I was 17, my mom had called my father. When my dad disappeared when I was young, he ended up going to a treatment center and he got sober. He ended up following a path of workshops and training, and he became an addictions counselor. And then he became the director of a treatment center way up in northern Alberta. And my mom had known this, and she called my father because my mom was very worried that I was going to kill myself or die or was living a high risk lifestyle. And so she begged my father to come down and told him, "You owe it to your son. You owe it to me. Get your ass down here and help your son." So he came down and he was trying to con me into going to his treatment center. And I wanted no part of going to his center. Anyway, eventually he bribed me enough with money and I went to his treatment center and I could bring a friend. So me and my buddy headed up to the center and we spent 30 days. It was 28 days in those days. And I didn't plan on going to treatment, so I didn't plan on really quitting. But I came out of treatment and I had quit drinking for like 2 months and I quit smoking weed for a month. And I thought that was pretty successful, but it wasn't long and I was right back to my antics and, you know, start drinking back to the same old behavior. The next year I almost killed a guy in a fight. He didn't show up in court the following year, so I got off, but I was in and out of jail as an adult like crazy. And alcohol had gotten totally out of control. I had been dabbling in some drugs too, but the alcohol was my drug of no choice in those days. And fighting was a regular occurrence for me all through my life. Being Indigenous in a white world, I had to really fight my way through life, and there wasn't a lot of Indigenous people, these brown-skinned people in our community. So people were very prejudiced, and kids can be mean, and parents can be mean. And so I learned how to fight, man, and I was a good fighter. And so even through these drunken tirades, I would get in these fights and embarrass myself. And, you know, finally, about 22 years old, after trying to quit drinking for a number of years at this point, probably from 20 to 22, I had really tried to quit and moderate, do some things differently. And I just kept getting back into the scrapes and I just couldn't control it. But I didn't know what was wrong with me. So by the time I was 22, I had this one bad night out and I woke up somewhere I shouldn't have woken up. And I jumped in the work truck and I just prayed like I never prayed before. And I went to a Catholic school my whole life, so I didn't pray much. Hey, I really liked the God that they taught me about. And I never prayed much, but this day I prayed and I begged Creator to save me, man, and allow me not to drink anymore. And to this day, since that day I prayed, I've never had a drop of alcohol. But that wasn't the end of my illness because I suffer a spiritual malady. So now I'm sober. I got no medication. I got no liquor. I got my weed and I'm smoking like a madman. And I started a business because I'm pretty restless, irritable, discontent. I just I want to be happy, but I don't know how. And I'm kind of take some inventory of the world and I'm like, well, people with money are happy, so how can you have money? I'm like, build a business. I had no skills. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I kind of wanted to build a business so I could have money to be happy because that's what money's supposed to do for you. So I did that and I came up with an idea. I started a ground frost removal company. By the time I was 24, I had it in full swing and I would lay coal on the ground. I'd lay coal with these torches and I would cover them with 45-gallon drums that I had cut in half. So these half barrels to cover the trenches that I would lay out by hand with a shovel and a dump truck. And through these years of this early business career, I'd met my wife Shannon, who I'd actually grown up with, but we got together. She came with one daughter. We had two more daughters. And I spent the next 15 years building this company. And by the time I was, 28 years old, I was making 1 million a year. By the time I was 32, I was making 2 million a year. I'd bought $1 million house out on a road outside of Calgary called Paradise Road on a 3-acre parcel. Beautiful house, beautiful family, but I'm still restless, irritable, discontent. I'm still angry, bro. I'm still violent. I threaten the guys that work for me. I road rage like no one's business, jumping out of vehicles, high speed chases with my family, punching guys out in the streets, chasing them on foot down the street, like doing just crazy shit. All of this in front of my wife and kids. Sometimes my kids are just like, Daddy, what are you doing? And I was just powerless over my anger, right? And uh and then by the time I was 36, the business quit working, man. I was getting that sense of ease and comfort out of shiny things, out of money, out of status, out of all these things. And it quit working. And then when I look back, I can see where I was not healthy again and I was looking for something. And I went out to Winnipeg looking for my brother because he was a missing person. My brother's an addict and alcoholic also. And he was missing. So me and my dad went out there looking for him, and I was showing pictures of his face all over downtown Winnipeg. It's a pretty rough city in the eastern central part of Canada. And I found a guy who said, "I know your brother." And I said, "Can you jump in my rental car and take me to him?" So this guy jumps in and I takes me to the north end of Winnipeg, where you do not want to go. It's gangs and drugs and all sorts of shit up there. But I go into this house and the guy who's in there says, "Are you a narc?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not a narc, man. Just looking for my bro." And he's like, "Well, here, smoke this crack and we'll prove you're not a narc." And you know that kind of lifestyle. Many times I've smoked dope or did something in front of a new dealer or whatever because you got to prove you're not a cop, right? And so they want to do certain things and test you. And so I passed the test. Had a couple hoots of crack. Never smoked crack before. Had my couple hoots of crack, looked around for my brother, couldn't find him. Did find him the next day, got him to safety and went back to Calgary. Flew back home. What I didn't understand was I had just set off. What I learned in 12-step recovery was the allergy of the body. I set off the allergy of the body that now sparked this obsession of my mind. And when I got back to Calgary, all I could think about was smoking crack. And that's what I did. I succumbed to that desire. I failed to resist because I don't have the power. And I took some crack. I did it sneaky under my wife's back, behind her back, and I became a crack addict. First year, no problem. I could hide it pretty good. Second year, I ended up hiding it the whole time. But it got real hard after the second year because I was full blown addict after the second year. So over the next 6 years, I systematically destroyed my life. Everything I had built all my life for the 15 years I'd run that business, my whole family, everything that we had had together, the boats, the trailers, the girls in all their sports and having everything they wanted, all gone. Burnt my life to a crisp. My wife and kids were homeless, living in my old nanny's basement crawl space. I'm now living in a on a foreclosed property in a trailer I borrowed back from my ex-wife. My ex-wife doesn't want anything to do with me at this point because she's just devastated, doesn't know I was a crackhead. And then my journey began. Smoked crack for a little bit in that trailer and then realized I fucking don't know what I'm doing with my life and I'm just devastated. I want to fucking kill myself. Is really what I want to do. I'm so ashamed and I don't know what's the matter with me. But my dad was in a recovery program for many years, like 35 years at the time. And I had asked him to take me to a meeting one night finally. And I was very humbled asking him. And he said, "Son, I've been waiting 35 years for you to ask me that question." He took me to one of my first meetings and I went in there and I spewed anger. When I got asked to share, I just shared what I could and I had nothing to offer. So I shared what I couldn't offer, which was anger and a lot of gross stuff that I said and talked about. And then I went to another meeting I went to meeting every day actually. I detoxed in meetings, 5 meetings a day for like a month. After like a month and a half, I had a bad day and I said, "I need a meeting, Dad." And my dad was with me the whole time. I just hung on to my dad's pant leg like my life depended on it because it did. And the thing about these meetings is that people loved me, man, and they would talk to me and I didn't understand. I didn't understand that kind of love. And eventually I went to a speaker meeting very similar to this, except it was in person. And I heard this gentleman talk, and he was explaining things that I couldn't otherwise account, my anger, my lust, my hookers, the powerlessness over the drugs, and just everything was saying, the feelings and the emotions and everything. I related. And when that speaker meeting was over, I looked at my dad and I was like, "Holy shit, that was awesome. He'd be a good sponsor. Hey, Dad." My dad's like, "He sure would. Why don't you ask him?" Dude, I was so scared. I couldn't even bring myself to think that I was gonna ask this guy for help. My dad finally convinced me to try to ask him. And so I talked to this guy and I asked him, "Hey, can you help me, man? I'm fucking dying here." He said, "I'll help you, bro. I'll help you." And this guy met me every day for the next 4 months, 5 months. He showed me what I was dealing with as far as the true predicament of an alcoholic and addict who can't say no, who has no power against the first drink or drug. He talked to me about the allergy of the body. He told me that the only thing that worked for him was a faith in a some type of higher power. And I didn't want to believe that shit. But you know what I did believe? I believed in him. I believed him. So I kept meeting him and I couldn't believe that he would meet me every week and he was getting nothing from this. Like he was getting no money, no nothing. But he met me every week. And I thought that was pretty wild. So I kept meeting him and I got to the personal inventory portion of recovery where you look at yourself. And I haven't met an addict yet who has real contented, beautiful, good sobriety that hasn't done a deep personal inventory. It's a requirement for us to really have good contented sobriety. I've seen people sober and do no inventory and no work. They're fucking miserable, man. I don't want to be like that. So today I still do a lot of heavy inventory. But at that time, I started realizing through that inventory process, one of the comments that he said that we're going to get down to causes and conditions. We're going to look at why you drink and why you make a heavy going of life. And I'm like, okay. So as we started that process, I was like, wow, there's a reason why I'm a piece of shit. There's a reason why I'm angry. There's a reason why I smoke so much crack and drink and do all these things. And I started a little bit of, I stopped shaming and guilting myself because I saw there was reasons. And then I finished off the process with him. I was so thankful, and this guy loved me, man. And I loved him. And I think it was the first time I ever could say I loved a man without feeling weird about it. And he said, "Now you go help someone else." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, that's the deal." So I found some other men who were struggling, who weren't too far behind me in their recovery, and I started helping them do the same thing. And then I dedicate my life to doing that. But what recovery has shown me, it allowed me to get out of who I'm not. It allowed me to remove who I thought I was, but made me very, very sick. A lot of who I thought I was based on the world of the material, based on ideas and belief systems that were indoctrinated in me right from school, from my skin color, from being Indian, from being male, just all these things that I just thought was life. I look at them now and I'm like, no, they were belief systems. And I was like, well, whose belief systems am I even living by? They're not even mine. So I used my higher power to help me search these things out and remove these things and try to change who I was because I knew the core of me was a good, kind-hearted human being that really did love. I just didn't know how to find it. But through the processes of my recovery, I was able to find little bits and pieces of me, discard little bits and pieces of who I thought I was. And a lot of that came through me helping other men and talking to them and getting to know them and feeling their heart, feeling my heart and connecting you know, and it's just been a beautiful journey, man. It's been I look at all the pain and hardship that I had to go through when I finally burnt my life down almost 10 years ago. And I look back at that rubble of what my life was and all the pain I was in, and I look at it today and go, it had to be that way. It had to be that painful for me to find a crack in this path of finding a light and searching out light within myself because I was a very dark person and I didn't even know it. That's the thing about this disease. It's so cunning and it hides itself so well, and I don't even know I'm sick. but I know when I'm sick today because I work a solid program. I have people in my life who care more about my life than my feelings, who I will listen to their feedback and tell me about my life. I do that with other people. I go to meetings, different recovery meetings. I'm a part of my native culture. I'm a fifth year sun dancer, which is a hard thing to be. I practice ceremony. I know songs. I'm learning my language. A lot of that I ran away from because of the prejudice I received and what I saw in the world as I grew up. I didn't want to be Indian. I didn't want to be Native. And I ran from that. Now I embrace it because it's such a core of me. And I help other people find authentic truth of who they are. And I just help, help, help. And I built this business. You can see my podcast behind me, the UDR cast, Uncover, Discover, Recovery. My business is Bill Ward Life. And Bill Ward, help people find their life today. And I help them do all the things that I had to do, that you have to do. And there's a recipe here. And when we follow this recipe, it really, really works, right? This life that I've been given today is such a beautiful way of living. And I had no idea it could be this beautiful. What's so minimal of things? I'm a minimalist. I don't want everything that I used to want because I know that it doesn't make me happy anyway. But what I do seek more than anything is my relationship with my creator, my relationship and vulnerability with other men and women. And I have to stay grounded and not let money get in the way or women get in the way or, pornography or whatever the other temptations may be. But I've been doing this so long I can feel when I'm off. And so today, I run a podcast. I travel to First Nations communities. I go to meetings. I do big book studies. I got a big book study starting November 5th, 21st. Usually goes 5 or 6 months. 100 people show up to these studies that I do. I put them online and I just serve my creator and God's kids. And I'll finish with this. When you work for God and his kids will work for you. And that's my purest belief. And so I just wake up every day and it's a new adventure because I don't know what creator has in store for me. And when I came on tonight and met you and talked to you, and this is just another adventure that I can put in my pocket as some more message carried. And I really, really appreciate you having me here, taking the time to connect with me and see what relationship we can build to help serve our creator. So thank you for having me, brother.
Thank you. It was perfect. Pause it.